Hello, thanks for having me here today. I'll just jump right in. Who got an email that looked something like this a little while ago, kind of in the January, February range? I went back and found it the other day as I was digging through my email, and I noticed a couple of things that were kind of interesting. If we take that email and get rid of some of it, this is what you'll see. And there's a focus here on that where we were inviting people to come to this conference about investing in digital technology, but I don't think we knew that we were going to need to do it so quickly. The key element in here for me is our approach to technology needs to transform. So we thought we were going to be meeting with you in a situation like this. This was taken a few years ago with a little bit of Photoshop work put in for good measure. But today, I think we find ourselves meeting more like this. I think that we're participating from home or other remote locations with all the comforts and possibly some distractions. Some of you may be taking it a bit further than others. I hope you're at least you have your camera in the right place if you're going to participate like this guy. Love the shoes though. So here we are, our hearts, our habits and our methods, particularly how we problem solve and how we communicate, have never been more important than they are right now. Those of us who've made the shift are in better shape than those who have not. Those of us who are comfortable communicating digitally are more able to continue with business as usual towards the mission of our organizations. Today I hope to share a little bit about how we can communicate digitally and how we can facilitate good communication by thinking visually. And when I say visually, I mean visually and out loud. That's a term that I like to use with my teams. And we want to do this so that we can improve how we envision and build our digital products. My name's Steve Vest. I'm a senior UX designer at Globant. Been working in software with small footprint and Globant for about 10 years, and I've been in application and product development for 20 years. I'm excited to be here today to spend some time with you to talk a little bit about how we communicate design ideas using visual tools. Two quick definitions. I won't read them to you, but I will say this about digital transformation. The important part to me is that digital technology is infused in our organization. That's the key to understanding that we're embarking on a digital transformation. Relative to user experience, I want to talk a little bit today about how UX as a discipline actually affects every aspect of how a user interacts with your organization and your product. So, share a few experiences today, and hopefully we'll have some conversations later on. So why should you include UX as part of your product development project? Cost or ROI is probably the most compelling reason. Experimentation during the design process leads to discovery, sometimes through failure, but corrections are much more efficient if we're doing our corrections during the design phase than if we make those corrections after coding. So we want to discover where we fail to meet users' needs during experimentation before we release our product to the customer base. And good UX people know how to do this. So I'd like to start with a quick example. Here is a product where we did a lot of visual thinking, a lot of visual communications. This is an application that provides access to any number of cameras that might be on a job site or any other large facility. And it's an idea that works really well if you have a single user handling all of the cameras. The customer came to us not long ago and said, we want to look at the situation where camera A might be controlled by users 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. So we needed to talk about what happens when the users are fighting for control of that camera. And we needed to be able to do it quickly and within a small budget. So what you're seeing on screen now is an Adobe XD rendition of how we might address how the cameras work with multiple users. So here's a working prototype of this part of the software. You'll notice that we can provide realistic gestures such as drag and drop. We can hit the Apply New Position button, and this is pretty easy to create. So what we're trying to do is start a conversation with the client about what should the protocol be for having more than one user. We came up with the idea, I'll see if I can get it to restart. We came up with the idea that maybe there should be an apply button and an undo button as we're moving the camera to a new position. So through the prototyping, we can get these conversations going. This prototype took about 1 hour to build, and the iterations on that prototype would require even less effort and time. And we have the added benefit of having something to share with our friends on the development team so that they can say, hey, I can do that, or hey, that's going to be really difficult. So this is a quick example that exemplifies how a prototype can be used to examine an opportunity in a realistic, tangible way. In this case, we didn't need to create a bunch of documentation to try to explain it to someone. We just collaborated on possible solutions. We generated a hypothesis for what might work and threw out some ideas that we thought might not. And then we spent a bit of time whiteboarding these possible solutions before selecting one or two to prototype, which you just saw. Now I'm only showing side A of this. I'm only showing one of the users. If you want to find out the rest of the story, you're going to have to contact me so I can recommend a smart local company to provide for your remote site monitoring needs. So I mentioned some steps that we like to use for our planning and decision making. In my experience, the key to this process is being human-centered. And you'll find out soon that I'm a pretty big proponent of some kind of design thinking model. What you're seeing on this screen is how, if you do a search on Google for design thinking models and click on the images button, you're going to see that people represent this in a number of different ways. The reason why we have so many ways of looking at it is because it's a popular methodology. Most successful product teams buy into human-centeredness as a driving force in their design process. And many of these actually adhere to the principles inherent in some kind of design thinking model. There are lots of variations, but we're going to focus on just a couple to keep it simple. You will find that there are a number of common themes if you look across all of those diagrams. Common theme number one, notice all of these arrows that go forward and backwards and that interact with each other. We do see the focus on iteration in almost every design thinking model. And odds are we're not going to get it right on our first try. So let's look for the most efficient way to generate, share, and evaluate our ideas so that we can fail fast and discover solutions that users can absolutely confirm will meet their needs. Common theme number two, more than one of these models depicts a diverge to converge concept, meaning that we need a way to get lots of ideas on the table, eventually refining to a reduced number of those ideas while we're in the problem space, and also use the same kind of technique in the solution space. Experimentation and iteration has great value as we're discovering a best-in-class solution to meet a user's needs, and this divergence to convergence helps us to do this. Now this diagram has too many details for me, so moving ahead I'm going to pick on something that's a little bit simpler. I kept the things that are important to me. You're going to see that in the problem space we're determining the value add of our product, and in the solution space we're trying to confirm the usability. In other words, trying to figure out what works and what wows that user. We'll also notice that in divergence we're doing research. If you look at the lower part of the screen, in the convergence in the problem space we're doing synthesis, and over in the solution space we're doing a lot of ideation and finally converging on some implementations. that we can actually put in front of users and test. This is something I ran across the other day. I'd never really thought of it this way, but when a team is stuck, it's time to diverge. I have noticed in the past that we've actually done this unknowingly. When a team got stuck, we went back to the divergent phase and threw out a bunch of ideas and was able to sort of get unstuck and move ahead with the project. More about this as we move forward through some examples that you'll see. So enough about that theory. I was recently asked to work on a project to make things easier for travel agents that book vacations for Disney resorts worldwide. They have an interface right now that needs probably a second look. And I came into the project a little bit late. Some research had already been done. Some ideas had been documented. There was some sketching that had already taken place. It was my job as the UX guy to work with the team and discover a solution that we could present to Disney to actually see if we could activate a larger project. The plan was review the current system again as a team, this time with me in the mix. Number two was to evaluate the research that we had, and then consider some of the ideas with that research in mind. And then we were going to build an interactive prototype that was going to be the deliverable to Disney as part of a presentation. We needed to implement a dashboard, a shopping cart flow, and one thing that the group was really excited about was a call me back feature where agents could actually leave their name and number basically and not have to wait on hold, and a Disney support person would call them back. There were some known blockers. The research was sketchy, and it wasn't actual Disney travel agent users. It was actually people from Globant who were posing as those users. We also only used a survey, so our research wasn't all that qualitative. And I was the only native English speaker in the entire mix of about 10 people. So you're going to see how some of these blockers come into play. So we took the research and we used a product called Mural to create a visual representation. Again, I'm a big advocate of visual representation of things. And we created a way to look at our research in a way where we could move things around and we could talk about it. We needed to evaluate it, and so we used a star system so that we could have a conversation about what problems seemed to be most prominent and the ones that we needed to prioritize. After the initial review, I pulled some of the existing screens into Adobe XD and began experimenting with some of the ideas that were already on the table so that we could talk about them further. And we also, the QA person and I also talked about some other ideas that weren't actually on the table at the time. And we were able to share this pretty easily and pretty quickly using the products. You're going to see first sort of the shopping cart dashboard view. And nothing too fancy there. We were trying to put things in accordion so that the travel agents wouldn't have to go to new screens all of the time. But the thing that the team was most interested in improving was this call me back feature. And it's basically an assistant where that Disney travel agent can leave the phone number, as I mentioned before, and expect a call back over a short period of time instead of having to wait on hold, which has been a known problem with the current support. So we wrapped this up and took this demo to the team, all excited to show the developers what was going on. We talked about Call Me Back as a group, or I presented it to the group, and then I showed it to the dev team, and as usual said, okay, you've seen it. What do you think? Dead silence. Solid 2 minutes. I bit my tongue for at least 90 seconds before I even tried to prompt them. Mom always tells me I talk too much, so I was trying really hard to listen. Then I decided I needed to ask a few specific questions, hoping that that would get the conversation going. Again, no response. So I called it a day, but shared the link to the prototype and said, I tell you what, if you think of anything tonight, add some comments here, and I'll look for your written feedback. There wasn't a single bit of feedback. So I tweaked a few things that I wanted to change anyway, and showed it to the team again. Except this time I decided to get visual. I mentioned Mural as a tool earlier. So what we did, the business analyst, the QA, and I decided that we were going to create a mural board. And so we showed the demo again, except this time we taught them how to use Mural. We taught them how to post sticky notes on there and to write their ideas and to talk about what their thoughts were about what they had just seen, except we kept it anonymous. Mural has an anonymous mode, and just as an experiment, we wanted to see if people would talk if people didn't know who was doing the talking. And it was an overwhelming success. You see the results of this. This is not what it looked like at first. It looked like a lot of angry bees at first with people popping sticky notes all over the place. This was the end result. But I want you to know that once we put this into a visual format, it made a huge difference. People were able to discuss and prioritize and edit. It even got to where people were editing other people's post-it notes, correcting their English. And so we determined that visual was the way to go with this team. I also learned that, remember I mentioned that I was the only native English speaker? I also learned that the business analyst and I were going to run into some problems when things got complicated. But he took it upon himself after he got the hang of using Mural. One day I couldn't understand a complex flow, and he surprised me by saying, guess what, I put together a mural for you, and I think it can help. After a 15-minute review of this document, I was on board and able to keep moving forward. So those are examples of what I mean by thinking visually and communicating visually. Those were areas where we showed some success. Some of the tools I should mention at this point, when we're doing insights and themes, when we're looking for what kinds of problems we want to solve and what kind of opportunities there are, we can use whiteboards, we can use post-it notes, real post-it notes, we can use Mural. As we're evaluating opportunity areas, I like to get people involved to say, how might we, or what if our product did this? What if our product worked this way? And I love paper for that one, but Mural also works well. As we're converging in the problem space, we might continue to use paper. We might do some role playing, but I like to use an activity called How Might We? And usually that ends up on paper, and we say, how might we log a user into the system more easily? Or how might we help them find their location within the grocery store? Some tools when we're in the solution space would be, again, paper and pencil. Whiteboards. We don't need to be fancy here. Here was a device or a mobile application that we were working for, Samaritan's Purse, where they wanted to have people create baskets of gifts for people who probably weren't going to get anything for Christmas. We started out on paper. We then ended up in starting to get a little more fancy with our tools. We used Balsamic in this particular case, but Adobe XD and some others would help us to formalize more of the flow and how things might work. And then finally, we'd throw in a layer of design, and you're probably familiar with Photoshop and Sketch and Adobe XD and InVision. Those are some of the tools we use when we're in the refinement phase. Here's a quote that I ran across, not a famous guy, but a fellow named Nate Smith who just happens to have a blog. I did notice that he didn't have a ton of followers, but he's got another one now. When he was talking about the perception and the design of objects, if there's a mismatch in what I think something does and what it actually does, then its utility is lost to me. And I've seen that time and time again with our users during testing. So I'm going to switch now a little bit. I want to talk about how we communicate details. You remember that Our business analysts had a bit of success in helping me overcome a language barrier by communicating visually. Let's have some fun now, kind of the rest of the way, and look at some products that are actually real. Here's a product that was recently released by a client of ours. I came in late to the party, but I did get to see it in its initial release state. As you're looking at this onboarding flow, I want you to notice the clarity and the character of the animations and how the UI is put together. It's got a personality. And these characteristics, if we had not created this prototype, you can imagine how the developers might have interpreted what our designs would be and how the transitions would occur. It's just a fact that if we don't communicate clearly how something should work and how something should play out, we're going to lose out on the personality of some of our designs. And motion and animation are becoming more and more expected within applications. Did we do this through a spreadsheet? Did we do this in our user stories in Jira? No, we communicated the motion using some of the tools we have at our disposal. Another one, I'll try to be quiet and see if you can actually hear this. This is something that is new to Adobe XD. It's a new feature. Show me the team. Go back. Show me the score. Hide the score. But all of this motion hocus pocus must take tons of time, right? Not really. This is an application built in Adobe XD. You can't hear it, but what I'm saying right now is show me the team, hide the team, show me the score, hide the score, and I'm using voice to control this application. It doesn't take a lot of time. As a matter of fact, this example was created while I was learning Adobe XD, and I'll show you a second one in just a second. But I built both of these, not from scratch, but I built both of these within 90 minutes, and I was a novice with the application. So here's another one I think you'll find interesting and full of character. Again, very simple to build these. Doesn't take a lot of skill, but it shows the personality of these applications. And it shows my intent for the flow and how they work. So you'll notice this is just a simple water usage application, but just look at all the motion that's in there. And I want to be able to communicate that kind of thing to my development team and to my client to make sure that we're on track with the product. See if this one will play. This is another one full of personality and also full of great design and color. Again, I probably would not want to leave this kind of transition and this kind of personality to a team that I may not be familiar with or someone that I am just working with for the first or second time. So I need to be able to communicate these ideas. The best way to do it, you got it, visually. So as we're nearing the end of this conversation, at least for now, I wanted to share this with you. I ran across this during a design thinking presentation that is a really interesting perspective. Gene Litka from the Darden School of Business in Virginia suggested that design thinking can be applied to all kinds of problem solving, not just product design, and I think other people have made that assertion before. But she also goes through this phase where she talks about, or these phases, where she says that design thinking looks like a set of things that innovators do as they're building products. So these would be the do steps for design thinking, where we're gathering data, we're identifying our insights, the diverging and converging that we talked about earlier, eventually ending up with prototype and testing. But she also says that we need to be thinking about this model of design thinking as a set of personal experiences that people have as they're working on a product. You'll notice as we're gathering data, we're immersing ourselves. As we're identifying insight, we're making sense of products and things and how people interact with our business. All the way up to prototyping, where obviously we're visualizing, and then during testing, we're learning in action. Those are the things that we're experiencing. Here's my favorite part, though. When we do all of this, when we go through this process, when we go through this cycle, we're actually walking out of the product experience as a different person, someone different than when we entered into this cycle. So we're actually becoming more empathetic and curious as we get to know this product. We're becoming confident and inspired as we work with our team to diverge on ideas. We're collaborating, we're becoming user-driven, and then the last couple of steps, we're starting to create ideas or make our ideas feel real. So if you haven't considered some of these perspectives and you haven't been using visual tools to help with your product development, I urge you to consider doing so, because this iterating visually facilitates a lot of things that are good for teams. It creates increased participation across multiple audiences with your clients, with your business analysts, with your QAs, and with your developers and with your users. It's not just one audience. The visuals help me to span perspectives. We can also get more meaningful critiques. I can ask you to tell me something and we can talk about it more easily if you can point and touch. And we can also facilitate iterative testing, pre-code, which is important because that's where we're going to save money. That's about it for me, but I would like to speak with you more if you'll join me at the table at the appropriate time. I did want to share some resources with you that might be relevant to your digital transformation. And I also want to let you know I'll be sharing this slide deck that actually has some bonus content that you will be able to get your hands on. If you just ask, I'll give you the link and we'll get you a PDF. I'll leave it at that. Thank you for having me at the conference. And again, look forward to seeing you at the table.